Let's join Dad Arthur, Mom Ellie, their children Max, Lily, and magical dog Barley in their new adventure in the Dream Garden. Today they must confront the Pale Narcissus, a deceptive weed that has trapped a young girl in a dream of endless mirrors. The Dream Gardener and the Mirror of Comparison. Part 1. The Pale Narcissus. The morning in the Garden of Eternal Dreams did not break with its usual symphony of color. Instead of the vibrant, iridescent dawn that usually bathed the silver willow, the family awoke to a world muffled by a heavy, pearl-gray fog. Inside the Wander Wagon, the air felt strangely stagnant, lacking the usual scent of pine and magic that usually seeped through the vents. Arthur was the first to stir. When he tried to push open the main door, it resisted. It felt as though something heavy and leathery was leaning against the exterior.
"Ellie, kids, wake up,"
Arthur whispered, his voice tight. With a collective shoulder shrug, Arthur and Ellie managed to force the door open a few inches. As they stepped out onto the emerald moss, the family gasped in unison. Their beloved Wander Wagon, usually a beacon of bright colors and cozy charm, was nearly unrecognizable. A thick, invasive vine, the Pale Narcissus, had wrapped itself around the vehicle like a skeletal hand. The vine was unlike the others they had fought. It wasn't thorny or aggressive. It was smooth, translucent, and cold. Its leaves were shaped like jagged shards of glass, and as the light hit them, they didn't reflect the beauty of the garden. Instead, they seemed to swallow the color of the van's paint, leaving the metal looking dull and rusted in their wake. "It's beautiful, in a terrifying way," Lily whispered, reaching out a hand. "Don't touch it, Lily," Celestian's voice drifted through the fog. The Dream Gardener emerged from the mist, looking older than he had the day before. His cloak of petals was gray at the edges, and his eyes were clouded. "It is the vine of comparison. It doesn't destroy with force. It destroys with the quiet lie that you are not enough." Celestian pointed toward a cluster of dream bubbles nearby. Usually these spheres floated like soap bubbles, filled with the vivid, dancing lights of children's imaginations. Now they were stationary, anchored to the ground by the Pale Narcissus. The surfaces of the bubbles had turned into murky, distorted mirrors. Inside, the dreams looked gray and fragmented, like old photographs left too long in the sun. "This weed has reached the heart of a young artist named Maya," Celestian explained. "In her world, she no longer sees her own light. She only sees the distorted brilliance of others. This nightmare is a hall of mirrors where your own reflection is always the dimmest one in the room. It feeds on the 'why bother' and the 'I'll never be that good.'" Arthur looked at his family. He saw a shadow of doubt cross Max's face as he looked at the dull gray van. Even Barley, the golden retriever, was uncharacteristically quiet, his tail tucked slightly as he sniffed the cold, glass-like leaves of the vine. "If we don't clear this," Arthur said, his voice regaining its strength, "the van will lose its magic forever. And Maya will forget that she ever had a color of her own." "How do we enter?" Ellie asked. "By looking into the reflection," Celestian said. "But be warned. The mirror of comparison will try to show you your own failures. It will whisper that you are a lesser version of the person standing next to you. You must hold on to your truth, or you will become part of the gallery of shadows." The family stood together, their reflections caught in the mirrored leaves of the vine that hugged the van. In the reflection, Arthur looked tired and frail. Ellie looked worried and old. Max and Lily looked small and insignificant. It was a lie, a visual poison designed to weaken their resolve. Barley let out a low, guttural growl at his own reflection, a scrawny, dull-coated dog that looked nothing like the majestic retriever he was. He barked once, a sharp, defiant sound that cracked the stillness of the fog. Barley's right, Arthur said, gripping the handle of the van's door, which was slick with the vine's cold sap. It's just a trick of the light. They joined hands. Arthur placed his palm against a large, mirrored leaf that had grown over the van's window. As he did, the silver surface began to ripple like water. The coldness traveled up his arm, a numbing sensation that felt like liquid mercury. On 3, Arthur commanded. 1, 2, 3. With a sudden, violent pull, the nightmare sucked them in. The Garden of Eternal Dreams vanished in a flash of blinding silver light. There was no sound of wind or magic, only a sharp, high-pitched ringing, like a glass breaking in a far-off room. The Wheelers were gone, leaving the gray, suffocating silence of the fog behind as they plummeted into Maya's fractured world. The Dream Gardener and the Mirror of Comparison, Part 2, The Gallery of Diminished Souls. The world of Maya's dream did not welcome the Wheelers with open arms. It cold-shouldered them with an oppressive, shimmering silence. They landed on a floor made of polished obsidian that felt as slick as ice beneath their boots. As the silver flash faded, the family found themselves standing in the center of the Gallery of Infinite Shadows. It was a hall that stretched forever, its ceiling lost in a charcoal mist, and its walls lined with towering, ornate mirrors. But these were not mirrors of truth. "Look at the walls," Max whispered, his voice echoing unnaturally. "They're moving." Within the frames, hundreds of images of children were dancing, painting, and laughing. These reflected ones were bathed in a blinding neon radiance. Every stroke of their brushes created trails of stardust. Every note they sang turned into golden birds. They were the personification of perfection, flawless, effortless, and terrifyingly bright. "And there is Maya," Ellie said, pointing toward a lonely figure near a massive, cracked mirror at the far end of the hall. Maya looked small. She was huddled on a wooden stool, her shoulders hunched and her head bowed. In her hands, she clutched a wooden palette, but the paints on it had turned into gray, dried flakes. She was staring at her own reflection, but the mirror was sabotaging her. While the children in the mirrors around her glowed like miniature suns, Maya's reflection was a murky, desaturated ghost. It looked tired, clumsy, and utterly ordinary. As the Wheelers approached, they felt the weight of the gallery. The mirrors began to react to their presence. Arthur looked to his right and recoiled. In the reflection, he saw himself as a failed technician, his hands frozen helplessly over a heap of broken machinery, while his faithful Wanderwagon had turned into a pile of useless, rusted scrap. Ellie, meanwhile, saw herself as a lost explorer, standing in total darkness with a map torn to shreds, her compass spinning as frantically and pointlessly as everything else in this cursed labyrinth. The Pale Narcissus was here too, its translucent vines snaking out from the bottom of the mirror frames, wrapping around the legs of Maya's stool like a hungry predator. "Maya?" Arthur called out softly, trying to break the hypnotic spell of the glass. The girl didn't look up. Her voice was a dry rasp. "Why are you here? There's nothing to see. I'm just a smudge. Look at them." She gestured weakly toward the glowing reflections of her friends. "They have the light. They have the talent. Everything I do is just a gray imitation of a better world." This was the tragedy of Maya's heart. She was a gifted artist, but she had fallen into the trap of the thief of joy. She had begun to believe that someone else's brilliance meant her own darkness. Every time she saw a peer succeed, the Pale Narcissus grew a new leaf, and a little more color drained from her world. She wasn't just sad. She was being erased by her own envy and self-doubt. "Maya, those mirrors are lying to you," Ellie said, kneeling beside the girl. They aren't showing you their reality. They are showing you your own fear of not being enough. It doesn't matter if it's a lie, Maya whispered, a single tear tracing a gray path down her cheek. If it's all I can see, then it's my truth. I wanted to paint the sunrise, but how can I when my sun is so much dimmer than theirs? Suddenly, the gallery groaned. The Minute Snatcher from their previous adventure had been a creature of speed, but the guardian of this place was a creature of stillness. From the shadows between the mirrors, the mirror wraith emerged. He appeared in this dream from the girl's strengthening despair. It was a towering, faceless figure draped in robes of silver silk, its body made of 1,000 jagged mirror shards. It didn't speak with a mouth, but with the clinking sound of breaking glass. "Look deeper," the wraith chimed, its voice 1,000 whispers. "See the flaws, see the cracks. Why try when perfection is already claimed by others?" The wraith raised a hand, and the neon light from the surrounding mirrors intensified, blinding the family. The reflections of the perfect children began to step out of their frames, circling Maya and the Wheelers. They didn't attack. They simply outshone them. They stood there, beautiful and silent, making Maya feel more invisible with every passing second. The Pale Narcissus responded to the wraith's presence, its vines tightening around Maya's ankles and wrists, pinning her to the stool. The gray fog from the garden began to seep into her dream bubble, threatening to turn this shared nightmare into a permanent tomb of self-loathing. "We're losing her," Max cried out, shielding his eyes from the neon glare. "The more she looks at them, the more the vine grows." Barley let out a low, defiant growl. He didn't look at the neon phantoms. He looked only at Maya. He could smell the sour scent of the vine and the cold metallic tang of the mirror wraith. He stepped forward, his paws clicking on the obsidian floor, his golden fur the only warm thing in a world of cold, silver light. "Barley, wait!" Lily shouted, but the dog was already moving. He wasn't running to attack the wraith. He was heading for the dark corner where Maya's broken spirit sat. The mirror wraith turned its faceless head toward the golden retriever. It raised a shard-covered hand to cast a reflection of failure upon the dog, but Barley simply closed his eyes. He didn't need to see his reflection to know who he was. He had a different kind of sight, and he knew that the only way to save Maya was to change the very nature of what she was looking at. Arthur and Ellie joined hands, forming a barrier between the neon phantoms and the girl. "Focus on us, Maya," Arthur yelled over the screeching sound of the mirrors. "Don't look at the glass, look at the paint. Look at the possibilities." But Maya's eyes were locked on the wraith's silver chest, where she saw a distorted image of her own heart. Cold, gray, and stationary. The gallery was winning. The comparison was complete. The Wheelers were being pulled into the gray, their own colors starting to fade as the Pale Narcissus reached out for them. "Stay and watch," the wraith chimed. "Watch the others shine until you vanish." The Dream Gardener and the Mirror of Comparison. Part 3. The Masterpiece of the True Self. The mirror wraith loomed over them, its body a jagged mosaic of stolen confidence. The neon glare from the perfect reflections was now so intense that it began to bleach the very air, turning Maya's world into a flat, colorless void. The Pale Narcissus vines tightened, their glassy leaves humming with the vibration of Maya's deepening doubt. She had almost vanished into her own shadow. "It's not enough to tell her she's wrong," Ellie shouted over the grinding sound of the glass. "We have to show her what's real." Barley acted first. The golden retriever stepped into the center of the dark obsidian floor, his paws glowing with a soft, grounded warmth. He ignored the towering mirror wraith and its mocking reflections. Instead, he sat directly in front of Maya, blocking her view of the cold silver chest of the monster. With a low, rhythmic huff, Barley began to radiate his golden magic, but it wasn't a flash of light. It was a slow, steady pulse of creation. From the golden aura of his fur, objects began to materialize, solid and heavy against the flickering illusion of the gallery. First, a massive blank canvas appeared, stretching between two sturdy wooden beams. Then, a wooden stool, much warmer and more real than the one Maya sat upon. Finally, with a playful wag of his tail, Barley summoned a set of living paints. These weren't the neon, artificial colors of the mirrors. They were deep, earthy ochres, vibrant lapis lazuli, and forest greens that smelled of damp earth and moss.
Maya, look,
Max said, pointing at the canvas.
this is yours. It's empty because it doesn't care about the others. It only cares about what you have to say.
Arthur stepped forward. He picked up a brush and offered it to the girl.
The mirrors show you a finished world that isn't yours. But this canvas? This is a beginning. And a beginning is the only thing a shadow can't touch.
Maya's hands trembled. The pale narcissus vines hissed, attempting to pull her fingers away from the brush. The mirror wraith leaned down, its face of shards reflecting 1,000 versions of her failures. "Why stain the white with your gray soul?" it chimed. Maya looked at the brush, then at the Wheelers, and finally at Barley, who rested his heavy head on her knee. The warmth from the dog seemed to melt the icy grip of the vines. She took a deep breath, the first real breath she had taken since the dream began, and reached out. "I don't want to be like them," she whispered, her voice gaining a sudden, sharp clarity. "I just want to remember what it feels like to paint." She dipped the brush into the living lapis. The paint hummed under her touch. She turned away from the shimmering mirrors and made the first stroke across the white canvas. It was a bold, imperfect streak of blue. It wasn't perfect, and it didn't glow with stardust, but it was thick, textured, and vibrantly real. The moment the paint touched the canvas, a shockwave of color rippled through the gallery. The mirror wraith recoiled as if struck. The neon reflections of the perfect children began to flicker and dim. They were ghosts of comparison, and they had no power against the act of true creation.
"More!"
Lily cheered.
"Paint the sun! Paint the garden!"
Maya began to move with a frantic, joyful energy. She splashed sun yellow and fire red onto the canvas. She didn't look at the mirrors to see if she was better than her friends. She only looked at the way the colors danced together. As she worked, the pale narcissus vines began to shrivel and turn into harmless, dried straw. The gray fog in her heart evaporated, replaced by the heat of her own imagination. The mirror wraith let out a final, splintering shriek. Its body of shards couldn't handle the honesty of Maya's art. It shattered into a million harmless glass beads that pattered onto the floor like rain. The gallery of shadows collapsed, the mirrors dissolving into mist, and the obsidian floor transformed back into the soft, sun-drenched floorboards of a real art studio. Maya stood back, her clothes splattered with paint, a wide, genuine smile lighting up her face. The canvas wasn't a mirror, it was a window into her own soul. "Thank you," she said, hugging Barley's neck. "I forgot that the light was inside me all along." With a final surge of golden light, the dream bubble softened. The Wheelers felt the familiar pull of the garden calling them back. They blinked, and suddenly they were standing on the emerald moss beneath the silver willow. The gray fog was gone. The wander wagon was free, its colorful paint shining brighter than ever in the morning sun. The pale narcissus had vanished, and in its place grew a single, magnificent silver rose of reflections. Its petals were like polished mirrors,
But when Arthur looked into them, he didn't see a failed explorer. He saw a brave father.
When Lily looked, she saw a girl with a heart of gold. Celestian approached them, his petal cloak vibrant and full. "There is peace in the dream garden this night, because you taught the dreamers that they are the architects of their own light," he said softly. The family climbed back into the wander wagon. They didn't rush to leave. They sat for a moment, listening to the quiet rustle of the silver willow. They knew that there would always be more weeds to pull, both in the garden and in the world outside. But as they looked at each other, they realized they didn't need to be better than anyone else. They were the Wheelers, and that was exactly who they were meant to be. As the van finally rolled across the moonlight bridge, Barley curled up in his favorite corner, dreaming of sun-warmed stones and the smell of fresh paint, while the stars above the garden sang a song of quiet, perfect contentment. Good night, and subscribe to join the Wheelers family on their new adventure.